Welcome to Cinemaphile, where we showcase the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers and talk to them about their work. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar. You can listen to other interviews by going to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar at Spotify. Death and Taxes is a featured documentary about wealth, inequality, and the American dream, viewed through the lens of the estate tax and a very personal story of a father and a son at odds over what kind of inheritance we want to leave our kids and our country. Wonderfully done on at least two levels. Certainly the bigger picture of the distribution of wealth in this country, our policies regarding the wealthy and the people who are not, but also a very personal story about a father and a son. And honored today to have with us the director of Death and Taxes, Justin Schein. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really think that you are doing not only a public service by laying out the issues around taxes and tax policy and wealth inequality in this country. You're a longtime filmmaker. When did this idea come to you to do this kind of a film?
Well, as is so often the case in the films that I make, you start out doing one thing and it becomes another. So I didn't really start out to make a film about taxes. I started making a film about my parents, almost 30 years ago. My dad, who's a pretty interesting character, had been, a very powerful CEO, very successful. And when he retired, he came home and kind of directed that power at my mom. This was in the 1990s, and it was interesting to me to see how that was playing out. As it happened, he had become more and more obsessed with trying to reduce his taxes. And part of that was moving to Florida for the lower taxes, which my mom tried to do and eventually said that she couldn't do that anymore. And that led to them separating. So there was this kind of subtext about taxes in this film about their life. But as a son, I realized that a film needs drama, but like a family needed reconciliation. So I, I took the film and put it on the shelf, and my brother and I worked with my parents to help them get back together. And it wasn't until 2017 when the Trump tax bill was being created that I realized that this subject, which had been so much the focus of my dad's retirement, the estate tax might actually be repealed altogether. And I wanted to make a film about it. As you said, I've been making films for a long time, and I know that any good film, even if it's about an esoteric subject, needs characters, needs a story, it needs you need to see how it impacts people. And I went around asking people about their estates, people who were wealthy, and nobody wants to talk about it, which is just, it seems like money is one of the last taboos in America. People talk about other things. And I realized that I had this footage and of my family and my father talking about his very strong beliefs, and that maybe that could serve as the foundation for an exploration.
I think a lot of the film and his life have to do with when he was born. As I mentioned to you before we got started, my father was born literally 3 months before the Great Depression. And going through that period in American history, living that life had a profound impact on him. And I think on his outlook on life and money and holding on to money. So I think without, I'll be an armchair psychiatrist here, but it feels like that's some of what informs your father. Is that?
Definitely, definitely. When I looked at his life, it was amazing to see that it kind of really did parallel this economic road that America took, starting with the Depression, Great Depression. And as psychiatrists say, the way that you try to solve problems when you're a child sticks with you. He was raised in a family of garment workers. He was the youngest of four. They traveled around from apartment to apartment during the Depression, taking advantage of the first month's rent that landlords were offering. Ended up moving in with his parents, sleeping his grandparents. He slept in the same bed with his brother. And so he was always focused on trying to protect what he had so that he didn't have to experience that kind of deprivation when he grew older. And it was very much a part of what he took into the business world and made him very successful. He was a cost cutter. He was extremely savvy in terms of reducing costs. And, he went from a young lawyer to the head of Columbia Records to the president of Sony. But he was always that deep inside, this little boy, uh, not wanting to spend an extra nickel. And he taught that to me. And a lot of those lessons, I think, were, good ones. But his style could be really harsh. And he was an interesting guy.
In terms of that, in terms of what you described, his story is America's story. This kind of roller coaster from 1920s, 30s to the 1980s, where in fact historians usually point to the early 60s, 62, 63 as the pinnacle of American power dominance, economic opportunity. So in that period of time, he grew up. He became a successful businessman. So his story, his outlook is very much America's outlook. And again, if that's unfair, please let me know. But that's
No, no, I agree. He rode this wave of American power and economic prosperity that that the rest of the country also rode. I mean, he in post-war America, he had been in the Navy, and through that he went to college and law school, paid for by the GI Bill. Like so many Americans, many of them, millions of Americans, got low interest loans to buy homes, and that is the kind of nest egg that has grown to become this tremendous wealth that we have. I think Paul Krugman, who's in my film,
yeah,
calls this the Great Compression. There was this middle class that just grew out of government and high taxes. I mean, taxes in the 1950s were as high as 90% under Eisenhower, who was a Republican, and the economy was really exploding. And what's interesting is that my dad also was very influenced through the 70s. There was the gas crisis, and there was
yeah.
inflation, and he was highly enamored of Ronald Reagan, as were many Americans. And Reagan kind of introduced trickle down economics, and my dad was completely on board with that. This idea of tax cuts at the top, and that would stimulate the economy, which was, a valid and interesting idea, but it has not borne fruit, in my opinion. The film is an interesting and was very challenging attempt to interweave this history with this personal story.
And by the way, it was a joy getting to know your family and your friends, getting to know your father, because no one would ever say he's not intelligent, insightful, just a terrific person. I mean, you could see why he was successful in this film. You see, even in your discussions with him, knowing how he feels about a certain point of view that you don't share. I felt like you didn't, it wasn't a name calling. It wasn't like he just had a very intellectual way of trying to persuade you to his point of view. I appreciate that. Plus, your family, your mom's terrific. I was getting to know her a little bit, and your brother, and
Mhm.
it's that part of the film is really wonderful. I mean, it's just a good opportunity to get to know them and how all of these things played out in your life. And just speaking of Reagan very quickly, Reagan is the Rosetta Stone of everything that's happened since. He is. And his trick, his magic trick, politically speaking, was to convince people who weren't rich that he was talking about them when he
Yep,
talked about taxes. That is his magic trick.
you're so right, because the estate tax is a perfect example of that. It really impacts 0.1% of the population. It's almost nobody pays the estate tax. There's so many loopholes around it, so many ways around it. but people have been led to believe that it might impact them one day, and there's something un-American about it. But the estate tax was created by Teddy Roosevelt to deal with the situation that we're in right now, which is a handful of people collecting a huge amount of the wealth. I mean, the top 1% in America now has more wealth than the bottom 50%. And with that comes an erosion of opportunity. What is key for me is that my dad lived this kind of dream of working hard and succeeding that is kind of supposed to be the American dream. And that is becoming harder and harder for Americans today. The cost of healthcare, the cost of education, things like that. And part of the solution, not the only solution, is for people who have so much to pay their fair share, to pay my fair share. I don't think it should be so much that it changes anybody's lifestyle who's rich. There's plenty to go around, but it's become a game, for the super wealthy to avoid, and that's causing a lot of other people to suffer. And interestingly, on the personal side, the year that my dad got cancer was the year that my son was born. I was in this unique position where I was appreciating my dad in a new way because I all of a sudden understood that kind of, I understood it intellectually before, but once you holding your kid in your arms, you understand this desire to make sure they're secure. But also, I'm seeing the world around us and this democracy that I believe is also part of the inheritance we want to leave our kids. And that is teetering. And part of that problem is extreme wealth and inequality. So I just think, we need to have a discussion, an open discussion about these things.
Could not agree more. As we are doing this interview, we just saw another example of the transference of wealth from the bottom to the top. One of the most audacious examples in American history, just passed the House and Senate and signed into law. So this could not be more timely. This film,
Yep.
Death and Taxes. And I just want to remind our listeners, we're speaking with Justin Schein, and the film is available through.
Eight
Uh,
Above is the distributor.
okay,
It's going to be
yeah.
coming out in theaters on the 17th of July in New York, and then heading to LA on the 25th. And then we're going to be showing it, around the country and having local groups talk about some of these local issues. I mean, the reality of this budget bill that just passed is that it kind of creates a trickle down, so to speak, of misery, and local and state governments need to fill these holes from all of these cuts.
Right.
So it's going to cause the need to talk about taxes and wealth on the local level now as well. Yeah, I mean, this bill it couldn't be more clear when you're cutting about $1 trillion from Medicaid, healthcare and food for poor people, so that the top 1% can have a few $1 million more in tax cuts. It's just an exchange that I really don't think the people who are receiving all of them, these cuts want. I don't want my neighbors to be one illness away from losing their home. It's just not necessary.
The particularly egregious part of this bill for me in general is that this the slashing of government programs,
Mhm.
USAID, so many others that have a profound impact not only in our country but on the world are being done so that the tax cut that was passed in Trump's first term will not land so hard on the deficit. So the deficit is now being even more shouldered by the poor people of this country. So it's just so many reasons. And by the way, one of the things in the film Death and Taxes, I don't think it's a lot of play, and you touch on it in the film, and that is, in addition to the billionaires who live here in the country, there are they are sheltering their money offshore, which I don't think gets a lot of attention. How much money is out there in this sort of dark
Yep.
money world, swirling around the world, essentially never landing in one particular governance for any long enough to be taxed. So it's just moving around this huge amount of money in the trillions of dollars that no government will ever be able to tax. It's kind of an evil system to me. That
Yeah. Chuck Collins, who is in my film and is a activist, a longtime activist who was an heir to the Oscar Mayer fortune, actually, and gave up his money to become an activist, calls it the wealth defense industry, which has been created to, protect these fortunes. And the fact of the matter is that with Citizens United in the United States now, that contributions create power. You can put money, you can donate money to politicians and influence legislation. And there's, a lot of money going into maintain and create these bills that are cutting taxes for the wealthy.
what's been the reaction to your brother, from your mom, from
Yeah.
others in family? What sort of how's this landed with them?
I mean, it was very important to me that my brother and my mom kind of be part of this process. So pretty early on in the editing process, I showed them, cuts of the film and got their feedback. While my brother and I agree on a lot of things, he is definitely he's in the finance world and more conservative than I am. But more important than the issues, I wanted them both to feel like I was treating our dad fairly and the family. And so, having them communicate with me and give me feedback, I think has helped them to be on board. I don't know that I could have made this without that. So I think that they feel proud of it. I mean, we just had a screening up in Connecticut where some of the film was shot, and my mom did the Q&A with me. I mean, my mom is in many ways the unsung hero of the film. I mean,
She's
she's
amazing. She's
an
amazing.
artist,
Yeah.
and she eventually really stood up to my dad for what she needed. She just wants me to be, able to do my work. And she, as an artist herself, she's a dancer. She appreciates that. But, I also have to say that my dad, you see this film, and I'm filming my dad in some of the lowest moments of his life. His wife has just left him. He's heading down to Florida by himself, realizing he, made a mess of it. But he let me film him. And that's a real testament to his love for me and his respect for the work that I do. He's a complicated guy, but he's
Yeah.
not the bad guy here either. And so, in many ways, I want this to be kind of an example of how two people in a family can love each other and respect each other and disagree about things, which is more important to show now than ever. I mean,
I want to be clear. I was asking about your
mhm,
father, and I was describing my opinion of him. I understood. I mean, I grew up in a very
mhm.
similar set of circumstances, and I understand, given the times that my dad and your dad grew up, I understand their perspective. I get why they feel the way they do. Doesn't change my opinion that I'm right and they're wrong. But I respect
Also,
them. I mean,
but times have changed,
yeah.
I mean, they lived a different life than we
Yes.
did. I
Yeah.
mean, my dad, his life experience from growing up in the Depression to making all of this, he created it. He was also, I think, dealing with his recognition that of his mortality,
Yeah.
and kind of trying to deal with the fact that he was getting older and he wanted to be remembered and he wanted to do something for his grandchildren. So it's very there's no, I can't criticize his opinion. I just think that, if our country wasn't going through what it is right now, if people were able to work hard and move ahead like he did, I don't think any of this would matter as much. People should hold on to and enjoy the money that they've made. But we have a problem now, and this is part of it. So this needs to be part of the solution too. So
Really enjoyed this a lot. I want to really congratulations on weaving together this very personal story with it as a window into the world that we live in now, and being able to have discussions with people in your family and in the film about it. Is you did a masterful job of pulling these elements together. So my congratulations on Death and Taxes. So thank you.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We've been speaking with the director of Death and Taxes, and that would be Justin Schein. Justin, thank you.
Thanks.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar, and you can listen to previous interviews as well as special programming, or you can subscribe by going to Cinemaphile, that's F-I-L-E, with Mike Kaspar, at Spotify. Until next time, thank you for listening.